There's a growing belief that this is the season the Atlanta Braves try to reset the CBT, and there's a lot of reasons why this year makes a lot of sense. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Monday, December 2nd, your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. And something that we first brought up a couple weeks ago, and it's gained a lot of traction in Braves country, Braves media, or whatnot in the last week or two, is the idea that the Atlanta Braves are looking to reset the competitive balance tax this offseason. Reminder, catching everybody up here, this is the luxury tax. This is the extra penalty you pay on dollars over a specific salary threshold. In 2023, it was $233 million. The Braves went over, not by a lot, but they did go over. I want to say Atlanta's final payroll came out to $245, again, on a threshold of $233. 2024, Atlanta went well over it. Threshold was $237. The Braves spent $276, and we're within less than $5,000 of going over the third threshold, and I'll get that in a second. And so this has been 2 consecutive years Atlanta has gone into the competitive balance tax. And the first year you go over, it's a 20% tax on your overage. The second year, it's 30%. So it costs you more to go over in the second year. In the third year, it becomes a 50% tax. So you sign a dude for $10 million, you have to pay 15. He gets 10, and you remit 5 to the league, which is used for different things. It was used for helping make teams whole from broadcast issues. There's a whole list of things it gets used for, but you have to remit an additional 5 to the league. And those bills always come out in December. So we don't have the official number for Atlanta this year, but we know that they went over. And then I mentioned the tiers. Every $20 million you go above that threshold, which for last year was $237. Every $20 million you go over, there's a surcharge. So once you hit $20 million over, you're into the second tier. That's a 12% surcharge. You pay that on top of your whatever it is, your 20, your 30, or whatever. The second tier, the third tier, the second surcharge amount becomes $42.5 million. That's when you hit $40 million over. The big thing there is when you also do that, your highest selection in the draft is moved back 10 spots. And so you lose the bonus pool that comes along with that. Your first pick is obviously the biggest draft pool of them all. And so that's the tier that Atlanta was trying to not go over. And we heard from Alex Anthopoulos and Brian Stitker right after the season ended. Literally, it was less than 48 hours. That game, the final game in San Diego, was on Wednesday. It was a Wednesday. I remember it was an evening game. I don't think it was a late game. It was an evening game. And we spoke to them on Zoom on Friday. So in less than 48 hours, it was like lunchtime Friday. So less than 48 hours after the season ended, we spoke to Alex Anthopoulos. That's where he told us the expectation was the coaching staff wouldn't change. They ended up doing that. The expectation was they'd pick up all of the options. It was Ozuna, Darno, and Bummer were specifically mentioned. They didn't get Darno's option. And Anthopoulos told us the payroll was going to go up. It had gone up almost every year he'd been here. The expectation was that payroll was going to go up for 2025. I don't think Alex Anthopoulos was intentionally lying to us. Every interaction I've had with him, he tells us as much as he's able to tell us about what they're doing. It is my belief that, and he gave a caveat up front, that they hadn't really sat down and looked at all of this stuff. So it was just the vibes, right? The vibes of how the offseason was going to go. I am convinced that Atlanta decided when they got the news that Spencer Strider, that Ronald Acuna Jr. wouldn't be ready to start the season, you knew you were going to have to do more work maybe than you were expecting. You weren't going to have them for a while, is when they decided to pivot and say, hey, we're going to reset the CBT. And there's a couple reasons why you can expect the team to get better next year in some areas. There are some reasons you can expect the team to get worse in some areas next year. We'll start off, I'm going to get to the reasons why they could be worse next season. Okay, we'll do that in the second segment. The first segment, though, I want to talk about some of the reason to believe that you can not be super involved in free agency. Remember, we've talked about a normal offseason could be $60 million of spending. This, a luxury tax reset offseason, a winter of austerity, as I've been calling it, needs to be at $20 million or less. And then you have a couple million left in season to go get a guy or two at the trade deadline if you need to. I think one of the reasons why you could see Atlanta do this right here this year is because last season, your offense dealt with a ton of injuries and underperformance, and you still made the postseason. It wasn't a satisfying year, obviously. 89-73, you went second place in the NL East. You had won the division for 6 consecutive years, right? You went to the postseason and you got knocked out 2-0 by the Padres, who promptly turned around in the next round and lost to the eventual World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. So you lost to the team that lost to the champion. But consider this. Because of all of the injuries and other issues you dealt with last season, the offense probably wasn't really that good. There were areas where Atlanta did well, right? They had the 9th highest slugging in the league, 415. They were top 5 in home runs. But especially coming off of the generational year that this offense had in 2023, they tied the single season record for homers in a season with a juiced ball Minnesota Twins team for 2019. So really, Atlanta had it. They significantly underperformed based on batted ball inputs. We broke down a lot of this stuff, right? The ball seemed dead early in the year, things like that. And then Atlanta dealt with severe injuries. One of my favorite stats to remind everybody is, actually, no, let's wait. OptaStats, one of these stat houses out there, put out a stat on the final day of the season that said no other MLB team other than the 24 Atlanta Braves has ever made the playoffs with 3 opening day starters missing the final 35 plus games. In this case, you lost Spencer Strider on April 5th. You lost Ronald Acuna Jr. on May 26th. And they're referring to Austin Riley as the third one on August 18th. None of those guys played after those dates. Riley didn't return in the postseason, obviously. But even that kind of undersells it. Because, and here's the stat I wanted to actually use a second ago. Atlanta's opening day lineup got a grand total of 6 innings together this season. Sean Murphy got hurt in an at-bat. He missed 58 days. He returned on May 27th. Strider was already out, so your opening day lineup was now ruined. But that was literally the same day that Ronald Acuna Jr. went on the injured list after his injury in Pittsburgh. It was a couple days earlier that it actually happened, but that was the IL day for Ronald Acuna Jr. He was out the rest of the year. Michael Harris went down in mid-June, and by the time Michael Harris came back, Ozzie Albies was out. This was literally, you dealt with 2-month absences from 4 of your different starters, and all guys who either have been all-stars or are all-star caliber. Sean Murphy was an all-star in 23. Ronald Acuna Jr. was a dang MVP. Ozzie Albies has been a multi-time all-star. Michael Harris is all-star caliber to me and just has dealt with minor injuries and has kept him from showing on the field statistically that he is that. And so even if this just regresses to a normal amount of injuries, you've already shown that the rest of the offense that was there, your Matt Olson in that last third of the season where he was amazing, your Marcell Ozuna, and those other guys were good enough to get you into the postseason. Now, a lot of that was the pitching. They're coming in the second segment, but you already have a playoff caliber roster. And it is safe to assume that between better health, having your stars in the lineup more often, and the impacts of a new hitting coach, you should be able to improve on some of the rough statistics from 2024. Your batting average, 16th, literally right in the middle on baseball. If you sort, I was on Baseball Reference, if you sort by top or bottom, Atlanta never moves from the line they're on. 243 batting average, expected was 244. So right there, they did not under or overperform batting average. Slugging, they did. It was the 9th best slugging at 415. The expected slugging was 3rd best at 428. It's those deadened balls we talked about earlier in the season. But some of the other things, and some of this was new ways to attack the stars like Matt Olson. Some of this was the impact of lesser hitters filling in for a Riley or an Ozzie and guys like that. The Braves led baseball in whiffs, swing and miss rate, 28.1%. No other team was above 28%. So at least a couple percentage points worse than everybody else. And they were 4th worst at contact in the zone at 81%. I've talked on here before about Michael Harris specifically. Missed a lot of pitches in the heart of the plate that he took when he should have swung. So I fully expect one of the things Tim Hires has talked about as the new hitting coach is getting guys to be more aggressive at recognizing and swinging at their pitches. I would expect Atlanta to improve at both zone swings, like the rate of swings, and zone contact from that 4th worst 81% last season. So you combine, you don't have to play guys like Gio Urshela and Whit Merrifield for 2 months. And again, nothing against Gio Urshela and Whit Merrifield. They got us into the postseason. They were great guys in the clubhouse, but it's hard to argue they're better than Austin Riley and Ozzie Albies. Same thing with having to play. You played Eddie Rosario after he was DFA'd for a while in the outfield. You played Jared Kelenic every day because you were down a bunch of guys. You grab Ramon Laureano off the scrap heap. Having the starters in there, even a shortened schedule of Ronald Acuna Jr., means that the offense should be better in 2025 than it was last year. Now, I don't think it's going to be 2023 good, and I think in retrospect, we can say that may have just been one of the greatest seasons in baseball history from an offensive perspective, and we maybe didn't appreciate how much above standard performance that was until obviously it was over, right? In retrospect, that was special, and it was probably a little not inappropriate. It was probably a little bit of a mistake of ours to assume that they would come anywhere close to what that season was. It was a confluence of a ton of factors, including an MVP season of Ronald and everything else, to get them there. I didn't expect them to fall off as far as they did, but the injuries did play part of that. If your offense did enough to get you in the postseason last year, it stands to reason they should be able to contribute more in 2025. And that's good because I believe you could actually run into a situation where the pitching staff takes a step back. And we'll break that down next right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsey Crosby talking about the potential Atlanta Braves decision to reset the CBT in 2025. And we've already established in the first segment there that the offense should be better. Not going to be 2023 levels. You may literally never see that again, but the offense should be better. And I think that's good because it is likely that the pitching staff takes a step back in 2025. 2024. Now, I'm sorry, in 2025. Now, in 24, there's both collective performance and individual performance that went really well in 24 that you can expect to not necessarily match in 2025. Part of that is just, I don't quite think we realize how good the pitching staff was. When we're watching every single game, it's very easy for us to get caught up and remember some of the bad things, right? Maybe it's Charlie Morton hitting 18 batters, which, fun fact, I thought it was a lot more than 18. That's barely over one every other start. He had 30 starts last year, and he hit 18 batters. Now, for some reason, I thought that was a lot higher than 18. Still a lot, but I thought it was higher. But like, we may be stuck on remembering the bad spot starts from some of these guys. Bryce Elder putting up a 652, right? Or Darius Vines coming up with an 856. Alan Winans, 2 starts and a 15.26 ERA. Like, we remember some of that stuff. But in reality, Atlanta's pitching staff as a whole was one of, if not the best in all of baseball. Their 3.49 ERA tied with the Seattle Mariners for number 1 in baseball. Now, Atlanta did it. Their relievers were better than their starters, which is how it is for most teams. Seattle was backwards. Their starters were better than their relievers. But Atlanta's starters, 3.58 ERA, third best in baseball. Atlanta's relievers, 3.32 ERA, third best in baseball. The 3.49 ERA isn't necessarily something that was a mirage or a fluke. Atlanta's field and independent pitching was 3.44, which led all of baseball and actually led by a lot. The next closest team was at 3.70, and MLB average was like 4.08. So Atlanta not only led in field and independent pitching, they led by a lot. But yeah, tied for first in ERA. Starting pitcher ERA was third. Relief ERA was third. By home runs allowed, it was the second best performance as a staff in baseball. The 150 home runs allowed by Braves pitchers, so less than 1 a game. They were 4 behind Kansas City, who plays in a much more pitcher-friendly park than Truist does. They had 146. The Braves were first in strikeouts by a lot. 1,553 was the number of strikeouts the Braves put up in 2024. Second was the Twins with 1,500 even. Third was the Astros at 1,479. Only 6 teams even had over 1,450 strikeouts. Atlanta had over 1,550. Only 2 teams broke 1,500, and the Twins nailed it on the dot. Again, league-leading performance in ERA, league-leading performance in strikeouts. WAR. The Braves were first in Baseball Reference WAR from their pitching staff at 12.5, and this is pretty evenly split. Third from the starters at 8.6, second from the relievers at 3.9. And by the way, if anybody ever tells you that, like, how good Cleveland's bullpen was last year, the Cleveland Guardians bullpen was first in relief, or was first in WAR at 7.5. They almost doubled up Atlanta in reliever WAR. That's how absurd their bullpen was in 2024. And obviously, they rode them so hard, it failed them in the postseason. Manuel Clase gave up more home runs in October than he did all season. More runs, I think, actually, in October than all season. So, as a collective group, that pitching staff was, you could argue, the best in baseball last year. And because of that, it is statistically most likely that they take a step back. Now, I don't know how far back it's going to be. They could be third best next year. They could be fifth best next year. They could be 16th. Look at what happened to the offense in 2024 versus 2023. In 2023, the Braves offense was among the best in baseball at everything. Runs, home runs, RBI, all of that stuff. They just destroyed baseball. The next year, a lot of that regressed back towards league average. Now, granted, they were one of the best at home runs and things like that, but still, the offense took a natural step back. That is how this stuff works. I don't expect the Braves pitching staff to be a bottom 10 pitching staff or anything, but I do think it's a little bit foolish for us to assume they can be number one again, and we need to prepare and just mentally prepare that they could take a small step back. And if you look at some of the individual stuff, individual pitchers, there's a reason to believe and to see the regression. I think we've talked about this a little bit a week or two ago. Maybe it was when we did the Zips projections that are out. But Chris Sale, amazing year. 18-3, 238 ERA, Cy Young winner, 7th place in the MVP. Statistically, he's likely to regress a little bit next year, even if he is fully healthy. And the health, as much as we don't want to admit it, is still a question for Chris Sale because of his age and his recent injury history. Max Fried, Charlie Morton are your two next highest innings guys, and they are gone. They take 59 starts out of the rotation. One of them may come back. Morton may come back. We talked about that on Friday, and a cheap deal if you need to add a back-end starter. But they're gone. And then Ronaldo Lopez, I think we need to understand how tenuous his performance was. On paper, really good. 26 appearances, 25 starts, 8-5 record, 199 ERA. He was worth 5.1 WAR. Second on the staff behind Chris Sale's 6.2. On the Zips projections for next year, Lopez is projected for 4.1. So a full WAR down, while Sale is projected for 4.5. Now, those haven't been updated since they non-tendered Laureano and Canyon and things like that, but you can see they've projected some of those pitchers to take a reasonable step back. A 4-WAR season is still a very good season from a starting pitcher. But 5.1 for Lopez last year, 6.2 for Sale. And for Lopez specifically, there's some stuff to worry about in the profile. He put up a 1.99 ERA last year, but a lot of the inputs said that should have been higher. Ronaldo Lopez's fielding independent pitching, and remember, Atlanta had the best FIP in all of baseball. Lopez's fielding independent pitching was 292, so almost a full run worse than what he actually did than his 1.99. His expected ERA, based on inputs, was a 3.94. So almost 2 runs worse than what he actually put up. And part of this is you have to understand the profile of Ronaldo Lopez is a fly ball pitcher that relies pretty heavily on his fastball. And he gives up a lot of hard hit balls. He gives up a lot of barrels. His hard hit rate, 42.2%, was 20th percentile last year. His barrel rate, 8.8%, was 26th percentile last year. Obviously, the higher, better there. And like that fastball, he only gave up 2 home runs on the fastball all year, despite throwing it 1,100 times. He gave up 2 homers. The actual stats, the slugging was a 369. The expected slugging was a 409. You have to remember the deadened baseballs works both ways. Like it hurts your offense because the balls don't fly as far, but it helps your fly ball pitchers because the balls don't fly as far. And Ronaldo Lopez, by all normal measurements, should have given up more than 2 home runs. And I think you can really see the factor of luck when you look at his curveball. He threw 244 of them last year. All but 20 were to lefties. Like, he is almost entirely fastball slider to a righty. But against a lefty, he will ramp up the curveball usage. He'll throw some changeups too. That curveball allowed a 151 batting average and a 264 slug with only 1 homer in 244 thrown. But here's the thing. The expected stats based on the inputs, 231 batting average, 80 points worse, and a 452 expected slugging, almost 200 points of slugging higher than what he actually put up. Now, this is only 43 batted ball events, so this is a little bit of small sample size and a little bit of luck. But we have to acknowledge that he significantly overperformed the expected numbers in the inputs last year. And that is a recipe to expect some regression. I'm not saying he's going to all of a sudden put up an ERA of 4 next year, but I'm saying the 199, he's probably going to give some of that back because it looks like he was exceptionally lucky when it came to the batted ball inputs, what the hitters did versus the statistical results he got from those. And then I think the other reason why you could say it makes sense, like, okay, so the offense should be better. The pitching staff's going to regress a little bit, you think. But it feels, if you have some confidence that the hitting will improve more than the pitching will take a step back, then you feel like this is still a postseason team. This is a team that can make October. Do they win the division? We don't know. But this is still a team that can win October. And when you factor in the understanding that Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna Jr. will not be ready to start 2025, and we don't know how good they'll be when they get back in the lineup, it makes sense to say, if we can get a 15% improvement in our offense, and we only give back 5 or 10% of the pitching performance that we did, we're still a better team than we were last season. Let's take advantage of the fact that we're not going to have them for a while, and when they come back, they may not be back to the same forms that they were pre-injury. Let's use this season to reset the CBT so that we're not paying a 50% overage on every dollar we spend. If we go over by $40 million, that's an extra $20 million in payroll that you can't spend because you're paying the tax. So if we assume that money is finite, which it is for the Atlanta Braves, they spend what they make, then it makes sense to say this is the season where, because we don't know when or how good Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna Jr. will be, but we know that statistically the offense should be better, and we know that the pitching staff is good and will take a small step back. We should still be good enough to make the postseason and to contend for the division. So this is the season where we need to try to reset the CBT now so we can go out, and when we have even more money coming off the books after next season, because you have Raisel Iglesias' $16 million is off the books, Marcell Ozuna's $16 million is off the books. That's $32 million right there, plus the additional spending that you could have done this season to get back to those payroll levels. You could have $100 million available to spend next offseason because your tax would only be 20% and not 50%. It makes sense. Now, is this satisfying? No. I do not want the Atlanta Braves to take a year off from spending significant money to try to reset the CBT, right? And I had a couple people express this thought to me on Twitter and YouTube comments, things like that, saying we expect our team to spend as much money as they can to try to compete. And I think this only really works if you see Atlanta find a way to let us know that they are going to spend more in the future. This is a strategic long-term decision. And I don't know if we'll ever see AA directly address this. The winter meetings are next week. I'm sure somebody from the beat is going to ask him. I would ask him if I was going to be there. I had to change my plans for a personal issue. I can't be at the winter meetings this year. I would have asked him myself. There's a belief the Braves are trying to reset the CBT this year. Are you trying to stay under? Are you going to go over for the right player? Are you going to spend the same amount? What's the offseason plan? And he wouldn't give us a straight answer, but at least we'd get him on the record with something. I don't think you'll ever hear Atlanta come out and say, yes, we are staying below the CBT. But I do think that is what they are trying to do as of now. Again, do I like it? No. Do I get it? Yes. We'll be back tomorrow with more Braves Today. In the meantime, if you have questions, concerns, comments, whatever it is, we're going to do show ideas. We're going to do a mailbag later this week. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Braves_today. Leave a comment on YouTube down below or anywhere else. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.